Everyone knows one rule in modern business: don't mess with the IT guy. The reason is simple: the IT guy usually knows everything. He understands your systems, your software, and often even your passwords. He knows how everything connects behind the scenes, where the weak points are, and what mistakes are quietly happening in the background. Most importantly, he knows exactly where all the digital skeletons are buried. This is a story about a company that tried to exploit their only IT specialist. They worked him endlessly, relied on him for everything, and refused to pay him fairly. In the end, it took only one email from him to cost the company a massive amount of money, and all of it could have been avoided if they had simply given him the raise he deserved. Let's call him Bob. Bob had been fascinated with computers since he was a kid. He was the kind of person who would take apart a computer just to see how it worked, then carefully put it back together again, often improving it along the way. By the time he became an adult, what started as curiosity had turned into a career. It wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was what he did best. Over the years, Bob worked at several different companies, building experience and developing a reputation as someone who could solve complicated technical problems. When systems failed or software broke in ways no one else could explain, Bob was the guy people called. Eventually, he landed a job at a service and distribution company in Ontario, Canada. At first, the job seemed normal enough. The company had a small IT department consisting of just 2 employees, Bob and another technician. The problem was that the company's internal systems were a complete mess. They had separate software programs for almost everything. One program handled dispatching, another managed inventory, another ran payroll, and yet another controlled accounting. None of these systems communicated with each other properly. As a result, employees constantly had to move information manually between systems. That process created endless errors, wasted time, and plenty of frustration across the company. Eventually, management decided something had to change. They wanted to modernize the company's infrastructure by installing an ERP system, Enterprise Resource Planning Software. An ERP system essentially acts as the central brain of a company. It connects everything together in a single database: inventory, customer orders, financial records, employees, suppliers, and operations. Bob immediately knew exactly which system would work best for them. He had implemented it before and understood how powerful it could be if it was set up correctly. But implementing an ERP system is not simple. It requires months of work, migrating data from old systems, configuring permissions, testing workflows, training staff, and solving countless unexpected problems. And guess who ended up doing most of that work? Bob. For months, he worked almost non-stop. Every department needed help. The warehouse team needed their inventory system configured. The sales department had to learn how to process orders through the new interface. Accounting needed financial reporting tools. Managers needed dashboards and analytics. Each department only needed to understand their small piece of the system. Bob, however, had to understand all of it. He became the central point of knowledge for the entire company. After months of chaos, late nights, and constant troubleshooting, the system finally stabilized. The ERP worked exactly as intended. Information flowed smoothly across departments, processes became faster, and the company became significantly more efficient. Soon everyone relied on the new system, which meant everyone relied on Bob. Not long after the system was fully operational, management made another big decision. They wanted to expand the company's reach across multiple time zones in Canada. At first, it sounded like an exciting opportunity for growth. But the moment the expansion began, new problems appeared. Orders started arriving early in the morning from Atlantic Canada. Emails began appearing late in the evening from clients in British Columbia. Suddenly, the company's operations stretched from one side of the country to the other. Employees started arriving earlier and staying later. And whenever something in the system didn't work exactly right, there was only one person they called: Bob. His official shift started at 8 in the morning, but by the time he walked into the office, people were already waiting. Bob, I emailed you at 6:30. Bob, the order system isn't working. Bob, I've been waiting 2 hours. By lunchtime, he was already exhausted. Then, just when he finally made it home in the evening and sat down for dinner, his phone would ring. Bob, I need help logging in. Bob, the system froze. Bob, this order won't process. The calls never seemed to stop. Eventually, management realized the IT department needed better coverage throughout the day. Their solution seemed simple: stagger the work schedules. Bob would start at 6 in the morning to handle early issues, while the other IT employee would work the evening shift to cover late problems. In theory, it solved everything, except the other IT employee had children and couldn't work evenings. He refused the schedule change. Management insisted, so he quit. Just like that, Bob became the only IT specialist in the entire company. Every technical problem now landed on his desk. Every system failure, every user complaint, every training session, every broken computer, every ERP issue, it all became Bob's responsibility. Management promised they would hire another technician soon, but there was a problem. They specifically wanted someone who already understood the ERP system. At the same time, they were offering a terrible salary. Qualified candidates simply weren't interested. Weeks turned into months, and Bob continued doing the work of an entire department by himself. Eventually, he asked management for a raise. They refused. Then he asked for overtime pay for the extra hours he was working. They refused again. Finally, they explained something that made his stomach sink. Technically, they were right. Under Ontario labor law, certain IT specialists were exempt from overtime regulations. That meant the company was not legally required to pay him extra for the additional hours he was working. Bob was exhausted. He worked incredibly long days, handled constant emergencies, trained new employees, and endured endless complaints whenever something didn't work instantly. Yet, every time he asked for fair compensation, management rejected the request. But Bob knew something they didn't fully understand. Because Bob had built the ERP system, he knew exactly what it recorded, and ERP systems record everything: login times, log-out times, activity logs, user behavior, system usage. Every single employee interaction with the system was stored inside the database. One day, Bob opened the ERP reporting tools and ran a report, not for himself, but for everyone else. He pulled login records for every non-management employee in the company, going all the way back to when the ERP system had first been installed. What he discovered was fascinating. Employees were regularly logging in early and working late, week after week, month after month. And according to Ontario labor law, salaried employees are still entitled to overtime pay after 44 hours per week, unless they are managers. Most of them weren't. Bob carefully compiled the data. Every extra hour worked, every early morning login, every late night logout. He organized everything into spreadsheets. Then he contacted an employment lawyer. The lawyer examined the data and immediately smiled. It was perfect evidence. Meanwhile, Bob quietly found another job. This new position offered better pay, better hours, and most importantly, respect for his work. Once everything was secured, he resigned from the company. There was no argument or drama. He simply gave notice and left. Management probably assumed the problem was solved. Eventually, they would find another IT specialist, but they had no idea what was about to happen next. Shortly after Bob left, every employee in the company received an email. The subject line read, "You're legally entitled to overtime pay." Inside the email was a spreadsheet listing each employee's name, their recorded work hours, and their calculated overtime totals. At the bottom of the message was the contact information for the employment lawyer. Chaos followed. Nearly every employee contacted the lawyer. Nearly every employee authorized him to negotiate on their behalf. Suddenly, the company faced an enormous legal problem. The evidence was undeniable. Their own system had recorded everything. Their own login data proved employees had been working significant overtime hours without proper compensation. Now the company had to pay. The payouts quickly became enormous. Back pay for overtime hours, legal fees, settlement costs. It all added up very quickly. And all of it happened because management refused to give one employee a reasonable raise. They could have solved the problem easily, pay Bob fairly, hire another IT worker, treat their staff with respect. Instead, they ended up paying almost the entire company. There's a clear lesson in this story. Companies often believe employees are easily replaceable, especially technical workers who quietly operate behind the scenes. But sometimes the quiet person in the IT department, the one fixing problems nobody else understands, knows far more about the business than management realizes. And if you treat that person badly, you might discover just how much damage a single email can cause. So, remember the rule. Never underestimate the IT guy. Because revenge doesn't always come from anger. Sometimes it comes from data.